Hi guys, I'm here to teach you guys how to make either meatballs, hamburger patties, or meatloaf. This I'm turning into hamburger patties, but it's all the same concept. It just depends on how you shape it. So these are the things that I have in here. Oh, this child, little bits of sun. Nope, just joking. Hot sauce, Worcestershire, these spices, these are the things that I'm using.
You're using
a little bit of that child.
Oh, why are you
all
using
ground nicely up into this bowl, and then I use fresh parsley, diced up onion, barbecue sauce, everything that you see here, okay? A little bit. And then in this bowl, now keep in mind I have probably two pounds, 2.5 pounds of ground pork in here, so you can use any ground meat you want. And I have 3 eggs. Okay, so that's quite a bit. So this is gonna probably give me 16 hamburgers. So if you use less, then use less eggs. Now, I'm gonna hand this back to my camera holder. So basically how this goes is I've got 3 eggs in here. Eggs in this case are used as a binder to bind the meat together, to attach it together, kind of like a glue. But with the eggs, in here, we also need breadcrumbs. What could you use for breadcrumbs? You could use panko. This is a traditional Italian breadcrumb. If you can't have breadcrumbs, you could use Rice Krispies, you could use oatmeal, you could crush up Doritos, you can use crackers. There's so many things that you can use for breadcrumbs, but basically you need to add enough breadcrumbs, and this has to be done by hand, and I always do it by hand. It's quite a bit. So you need the breadcrumbs there to basically absorb the moisture, and then so you're gonna mix everything together by hand, so that the flavors and of all the spices, seasonings, and sauces are through the meat. I like to use pork for my burgers. I find it gives a nice flavor and keeps the burger really, really juicy. But the main thing is when you go to form the burger into a patty, if you haven't added enough breadcrumbs and you put it on the grill or frying pan, it'll just fall apart. So you can see that this still looks pretty glossy. That means that there's not enough breadcrumbs in there, okay? Now, I'm gonna go through when you're rolling a hamburger patty or you're rolling a meatball, it is all the same, okay? So you want the internal temperature of all your ground meat to be 76 on the inside, so make sure you use a digital thermometer to make sure that your internal temperature is right. Okay?
76 Celsius?
76 Celsius, yes, 165 Fahrenheit. Okay, so you can see it's starting to pull away from the sides of the bowl. It's kind of like a dough. I'm gonna put in a little bit more breadcrumbs. You also don't wanna add too much because then it makes your burger dry. Okay, but you can see it's starting to make one big ball and it's kind of pulling away from the edges. That's a good sign that you've added enough structure that you can then start rolling. Okay, I've added some fresh parsley, which is nice for color. You can do whatever you want. You can add spices in. You could do a theme of a burger, like you could put pineapples in if you wanted to do like a Hawaiian themed burger. There's so many things you can do. You can look up a million recipes. You can use your own spice mix. But the main thing, the principle is always the same, whether you're doing meatballs, meatloaf, or hamburgers. You need eggs as a binder to keep it together, otherwise it falls apart, and some type of breadcrumb to absorb moisture so it stays together when you cook it. So the other thing that you need is you need a bowl full of water, so for the shaping. Okay, so you get a bowl of water. So I have a principle in my class, and the principle usually goes with all things. It's sticky things stick to other sticky things. So if your hands are all sticky and covered with meat, then next time you go pick some ground pork up, it's gonna stick to it and you're not gonna be able to make a ball. So if you dip your hands in water first, and then you go to form the hamburger, so keep in mind, this is another thing. So this is you're like, wow, that's a pretty big ball of meat. Now you always have to make your raw hamburger patty a lot bigger than what the bun size is, because hamburgers always shrink up quite a bit. Now some people actually have a hamburger press, and that's fine. So you can see that this is staying together, it's not really falling apart, so that's a good indicator. It's not sticking to my hands are pretty clean. That's a good indicator that you've added enough breadcrumb, okay? You have to do it by hand. So just make sure you have really clean hands, otherwise it should be just fine, okay? So there's your first patty. So then what I usually do is I dip my hands in the water, I form my next one, and then if I'm creating layers, I put parchment paper in between the layers and stack them up so that they don't stick together. You can do the same thing, cut out parchment paper squares, put them between your burgers, put them in a Ziploc bag and freeze them for another dinner. So you can make like 2 batches at one time if you want, and then keep homemade burgers in the freezer in frozen, but never stack them one on top of the other. They'll never come apart. Always put parchment paper cut into squares in between. Kind of like if you buy a frozen burger, there's always something in between them. You always want to do that. So this water bowl method for whether you're doing a meatball, so I've got here, I'll do a meatball for you. So here's another patty. Okay, keep in mind they shrink. So they look pretty big, but they're gonna shrink about 1/2 inch, right? So if you make them the perfect size of a bun, they're gonna shrink up to like be little tiny hockey pucks. Now when you do a meatball, keep in mind, you wanna dip your hands again, roll out your meatball, okay? Looks nice, right? You don't want something larger than this. Now keep in mind you could bake this, you could fry it, up to you completely. But again, you want the internal temperature 165 or for all ground meat, or 76 degrees Celsius, okay? So meatballs, hamburgers, meatloaf. We're using eggs as a binder to stick everything together. And we talked about internal temperature, so we're just killing it at curricular objectives. So until next time, see you guys.